If you're still struggling to get better at the game and don't know why, this video should help. I'm going to go over the top 5 most common mistakes that I still see not only new, but good players do. The very first mistake, and one that is more important than you think, is actually having a bad drop spot. Picking a drop spot that doesn't have enough loot or that is overly contested will not only lead you to dying off spawn more, but if you don't die off spawn, you usually won't have enough loot to win the game. There are 3 main things that you should be looking for in a drop spot. You should be looking for a drop spot with good loot, good positioning, and a low contestation rate. A good rule to keep in mind is that if a drop spot has 2 of these, it usually won't have the third. For example, if a drop spot has good loot and good positioning, it will usually be contested. If a drop spot has good positioning and isn't contested, it will usually have bad loot. And if a drop spot has good loot and usually isn't contested, it will usually be in a bad position. Keep this in mind when choosing a drop spot, as you should pick based on what your strengths and weaknesses are. If you're a bad fighter, make sure you're rarely contested, and if you're bad at rotating, pick a spot more towards the center of the map. In order to find a spot, I recommend heading on over to fortnite.gg. It is a free website where you can look at the current Fortnite map and see where every single loot spawn is. Spend some time planning out a few different drop spots and loot routes, and then take it to ranked, pubs, or even scrims and practice landing there. To just show you guys exactly what I mean, here are 3 examples. This little split at the top of the map has pretty decent loot and it's not very contested, but the reason why it's not very contested is because it has a really bad positioning, and there's no natural mobility to use. As for Reckless, it has really good loot and good positioning, but is super contested because of those. And a smaller split like this has pretty bad loot, but it has really good positioning, and since it does have bad loot, it's really contested. Relating to off spawn, a huge thing tons of players do is not getting enough loot off spawn. What I mean by this is that players will either leave without looting the entire drop spot, or they will go to fight other players with a low amount of mats or not enough shield. Whenever you are looting, keep these 3 things in mind. First off, you should make sure you have good enough guns to keep yourself alive, something even just like a shotgun should do. Then you need to farm mats as fast as possible, then make sure you have enough shield. You'd be surprised how often people die just because they pushed a fight without taking the 20 to 30 extra seconds to get a good amount of mats or max shield. Speaking of not taking extra time, a lot of players, including even some pros, get too impatient whenever playing the game. Whether it be in a tournament or even solo ranked, so many players make brainless plays just because they're getting bored during a fight. While something like this may not matter in pubs, it is a huge factor when it comes to good players dying in tournaments. To combat this, try not to get tunnel vision when playing and focus on what you should be doing rather than what you want to be doing. Similar to the theme of impatience, a lot of people when fighting leave themselves prone to being third party. While this may be a more specific mistake, you'd be surprised how often I see good players fall victim to this. Whenever you are taking a fight, the very first thing you should be doing is placing a few walls or positioning yourself differently to not get third party. Using those few extra builds will go a long way when it comes to staying healthy during these fights. Along with that, if you still do manage to get third partied, a little tip is to try to position yourself so that the enemy you're fighting is in between you and the third party. This will lead to the third party most likely shooting whoever you are fighting, and will potentially lead to your enemy being pinched to death. The last and probably most broad tip is to start thinking ahead. This applies to everything else I talked about in this video. You have to think ahead about where you want to drop, how much loot you'll need, and where third parties come from. Not thinking about how each action you'll take will affect you in the future might lead to you making some dumb plays, which will grief your own game and lead to you dying more than you should. To quickly recap, make sure you find a good spot that you know well and that will allow you to get every advantage you need. Make sure that you're getting enough loot for any potential early fights you may get into, and when you get into those fights, prevent yourself from being third party. Try to not make bad plays simply because you're impatient. Most importantly, make sure to plan and think ahead about everything you do, and I can almost guarantee you will see improvement. If you have anything specific you want me to make a video on, make sure to leave it in the comments down below. The support has been insane recently and we're closing in on 2,000 subs, so thank you. I hope each and every one of you has an amazing rest of your day, and thanks for watching.